It's late winter fishing at its best, right now on Outdoor Oklahoma.
Well, hello and welcome to Outdoor Oklahoma. I'm Todd Craighead. You know, the late winter months can be a great time of year to have lots of activities that you can do with your family and friends on your days off. Right now we're setting up for what we hope will be a fantastic late season winter goose hunt this afternoon. This time of year can let the avid angler feel maybe a little left out, kind of pining away, so to speak, for warmer spring days ahead. But the truth is, with the right techniques, late wintertime can be one of the best times of year to wet a line. Today, we're going to take you up to Oologah Lake in northeast Oklahoma, where we're going to share some tried and true techniques that will help you get your fishing fix in the dead of winter, and maybe also help you fill a live well full of slab crappie.
Crappie fishing is my hobby. I have two hobbies, crappie fishing and bow hunting for whitetail deer. Those are my two passions. The deer hunting's been since I was 10 or 12 years old. And the crappie fishing, other than spawn fishing, has been a passion for 14 years.
Well, right now, obviously those are waypoints that I got on there. Those are brush, and this time of the year they normally get on that brush and sit right there. I think there's some crappie sitting on top. This is actually a brush pile, and I think those are crappie that are sitting on top of it. First one, and it's a good one. Good wintertime fishing. I'm gonna throw a few of them in a live well. We're on Oologah Lake today. This is my home lake. I live here, and I really like fishing here in the wintertime. Just had a good success over the last few years. Brush pile fishing or structure fishing, doesn't necessarily have to be brush, is a pretty standard fishing on all lakes that I can think of and all times of the year. There's number two. Not quite big enough. And here on Oologah, most of the time when I start out looking for fish in the wintertime, 20 feet is the shallowest I look, and you can even find the fish sometimes out to 30 or 35 feet here. So brush pile fishing, just like you would on any other lake, maybe any other time of the year, just have to find the right depth of water. Another good, probably about 11-inch crappie. Just really good eating size. There's a couple reasons I like to fish up here. Obviously, I live here. That's one thing, but I sure don't mind traveling around to other lakes here in Oklahoma. But wintertime fishing, Oologah is known for being really good wintertime fishing. Brush pile fishing simply means most of the time the brush piles are put in by man-made. We get permission to put brush piles in. Some lakes even have core day. Oologah particularly has core day, they put a brush pile in. Different times of the year the fish will get on those brush piles depending on the time of the year would be the depth of the brush pile. In
The wintertime here on Oologah, usually it's a 20-foot brush pile. I fish 10-killer sometimes, and the brush piles or the standing trees we fish in 10-killer may be in as deep as 60 feet of water. Now the fish won't be that deep. And it's just like today, we were in 25 feet of water, but the top of the brush was 15 feet. And we used electronics, fished right over the top of them. So no matter what lake you're in or what time of the year, if you use your electronics and find the brush and are confident that you're seeing fish sitting on top of the brush, you can do that. But in the wintertime, the fish typically are deeper on the deeper brush piles.
This particular brush pile looks like it has crappie sitting on top of it. I am in 24 feet of water. The brush pile comes up to about 15 feet, and looks like there's crappie sitting on top of it. I have 2 jigs tied on, a technique we call double dipping. Really good pattern to fish for the winter time. On Oologah in particular, the wintertime fish usually are at least 20 to 30 feet deep. There's one. Another good fish. Just a good quality keeper fish.
The technique we mainly use to fish brush piles is a term. I don't know if it's a accepted term countrywide, but here in Oklahoma, and especially in the group of fishermen that I fish with, we call it double dipping. And simply that is, we take a rod in each hand and we generally put 2 jigs on. And most of the time we have 1/8 ounce, 2 1/8 jigs. This winter the fish have got a little more picky, and I think that was due to the water being clear. And we've went down to a 1/16 ounce jig. We fish a weedless jig head over the top of the brush. Keeps you free. Sometimes you have to drop down in the brush, and it keeps you free most of the time.
I'm getting over the top of a brush pile that I've seen crappie on, and I'm trying to drop my jigs. On my locator, I am looking at the jigs as they're going down, and I try to set that jig right at the top to start with. And if they're a little finicky and they're further down in, I drop down in. As you can tell, using weedless jig heads. And that keeps me not always totally free, but most of the time it'll keep you from getting snagged up. And I have noticed you don't miss any fish doing it that way either. But this is a 7-foot rod. I have some 10-foot rods. The difference is today the fish are at least 15 to 18 feet deep, and so I'm having to reel. So I'm using a little spinning reel on my rod. If the fish were, say, 12 feet or less, I use a 10-foot rod. Same technique, 2 jigs, drop down, and I can pull the fish when I get it hooked straight into the boat without having to reel. Just a difference in technique. Really good technique to get you down a couple of jigs to find the right depth for the crappie. And you can see I'm not looking up very much. I am looking down at my locator because I want to look and see right where I think my jigs are. I am actually looking at my jigs on top of this brush pile. There's another one. He's probably close to 10 inches, but we're going to let him grow a little bit. I am fishing over the top of a brush pile that is in about 23 or 24 foot of water. I'm going to jig my rod. And that's my jig that you see the echo coming up and down. That's my jig. I'm going to move back over the top of this brush pile. I am keeping my bottom jig right at the top of that brush pile. Once I glean what I feel like are the fish that are off the top, I may drop down another foot or so to try to pick up any fish that were sitting down deeper. But most of the fish on my graph when I've scanned by and the ones we've caught have been sitting right on top of that brush pile. I'm going to move my jig again and see if we can see it. There's my jig coming up and down. So I'm trying to keep my bottom jig right in the top part of that brush. And the solid yellow or bluish red lines, that's the top of the brush pile, which is where I feel the fish are sitting. The taller part of the brush pile is over here, and my jigs are going to be right in the top part of the brush pile. He's a fighter. He is a keeper. There's one. Now this feels like it could be a better fish, and it is a good fish. Now that is what we like to catch. That is a nice Oologah wintertime crappie. And you notice that fish does not have a lot of color. Two reasons. One is the water color. We are on Oologah and we typically don't have really clear water. Fish on 10 Killer and Fort Gibson here in Oklahoma will have a lot of really nice colors to them. And the second reason is that these fish are down deeper. They'll get better color when they get up shallow, but that is a really nice wintertime fish here on Oologah. Another really good fish. You know, I talked to you just a little bit ago about catching those fish right at the top, and I told you I may do it. I don't know if it's made the difference or not, but I dropped down probably another foot, and the last two that I've caught have been considerably bigger than the ones we were catching. So I'm gonna stick with that pattern a little bit and see if we can get them down about a foot into that brush. Another good fish. Another really good wintertime crappie. And that may have been the difference. The quality has definitely been better since I went about a foot deeper. So now I've got my bottom jig about a foot to a foot and a half into the brush. I have always liked to crappie fish, but typically my crappie fishing was like most people. As soon as I started hearing reports that they were on the bank and I didn't have a boat, so I would go wade. And when I moved onto the lake, I talked to a few guys, and everything that I heard was they're like human beings. They're going to eat every day. The challenge is, can you find what they want to eat and where they're at and that kind of thing. So with today's technology, with the internet, I started researching, and it just became a passion of mine to learn how to catch crappie year-round. And it wasn't easy. This is 14 years worth of experience. Since 2003, I have devoted my entire fishing experiences to crappie fishing only. And it has taken us some time. Taken time to figure out how to catch them in the spring versus the summer versus the fall and versus the winter. It's like anything else, no matter what your profession is, usually the more time you spend doing it, the better at it you get. With these rods being 7 feet, I have figured out when I hold that rod completely up and my jigs are at the top of the water, I am 14 feet. And then to tweak exactly how deep I am in relation to the use, I use my electronics. But for guys I have fishing in the boat with me, I show them how to set their rod. And with these rods being 7 foot, that will get you 14 feet when I hold the rod all the way extended when the jigs are down in the water. It feels like a good, it's a good fish. And you notice, I said a while ago I deepened up about a foot, so I'm down in the brush. I am using weedless jig heads, and I literally am down in the brush and I haven't got hung up. And that crappie was sitting down probably a foot and a half to 2 feet down in the brush. One thing that I would tell you is I actually like a little bit of wind, not a lot of wind. The reason that is, it makes your boat control easier. So when you are going along and you find a brush pile, I always try to mark the brush pile with a buoy marker and put my buoy marker upwind, maybe even 10 or 15 feet. It's just a reference so you can know where the brush pile is. That way I don't have to worry about getting my trolling motor or the boat into the buoy marker. That's just one little tip. And then another tip I'll give you, when you see those fish sitting on top, sometimes if the brush is thick enough, you won't see the crappie that are sitting down in the brush. So I always start out, because if I can catch them on top of the brush where I never get hung up, that's what I'm going to do. So I find the depth that I think the crappie are sitting,
and I use my locator to watch my jigs go down. And I fish right on top of the brush pile. And sometimes you'll catch several crappie, and then you'll think, well, I've caught what's here, and you can add a foot of line out, let another foot of line out, and you'll go down and you'll get into those fish. And we did that today. We got a little bite right on top of the pile, kind of slowed. I added another foot of line out, and we started catching them again just like we had been. And sometimes 2 jigs is impossible to do that through the brush. Sometimes I take the top jig off, and then that way I can feed 1 jig down through the brush pile instead of trying to feed 2 down through it.
Just a good solid keeper. I moved out a little bit on the outer edge of the brush pile, and there's still a few fish sitting there. As you can tell, we're shedding clothes. This is a kind of strange day for January. I guess it's the last day of January. It's supposed to be 70 degrees. We started out the morning, I think it was in the mid 40s, and a little bit cool when you're running across the water, because the water temp today is 40 degrees. So I'm going to shed a few clothes, and we're going to reposition and see if we can get back on some fish. Feels like a good fish. Pretty decent. Really good Oologah fish. Well, up here, the water visibility very rarely gets, a foot of visibility is really good on Oologah, so I really love braid. The sensitivity, just, it doesn't have any stretch. And the second thing is, if you do happen to get hung in a brush pile, you can straighten your hook out, and that's very key in the wintertime. The wintertime, if it's very cold, today wouldn't be too awful bad, your fingers just don't work as well. So the least amount of times you have to tie on, the better. Good solid fish. So yeah, I love to use braid, and that braid that I'm using today is actually 20-pound braid, 6-pound diameter of what monofilament would be. So not very big around, but very strong. So let's just say you said I don't live on a lake that is stained. I live on 10 Killer Lake in Oklahoma. I live on Broken Bow Lake in Oklahoma. 2 things you can do. You can, if you want to keep your braid on, you can tie a fluorocarbon leader. And I like a 6 or 8 foot fluorocarbon leader, or you can just strictly spool your line with monofilament or fluorocarbon, because the fish will see the line. And another thing in those clear lakes, I've experienced in the wintertime, we have had to go down to a tiny jig. I remember the first time I experienced that on 10 Killer, I was with a friend of mine. I wasn't very experienced with 10 Killer at all, and he literally wore me out for about 30 minutes because I had on bigger plastic baits and he had on a tiny hair jig. And so just know your lake, and if the water is very clear, the fish are going to be more boat shy, they're going to be more jig shy, and they're going to be more line shy. So you may have to change from braid, or if you're not a braid person, you're using monofilament, you may have to go from 6-pound to 4-pound just to make all the difference in the world. It's just experimenting with the watercolor, and the same way with the jigs. If the water is very clear, we like a clearer, more opaque, say pearl and pepper flake, some even clear bait, blue and white. Those colors are really good in clear water. When we get into stained water, and the lakes I'm thinking of that I fish are Eufaula and even Oologah, pumpkin and chartreuse, black and chartreuse, electric chicken. Those colors are really good in stained water. Pink, orange. One of the other good things about being out in the wintertime here on Oologah is you see great scenery. It's like the bald eagle sitting there watching us. The other day, I think we saw 6 or 7. There he goes, he's gonna come right at us. Is that not beautiful? That's a little small, but as you can see from the videos today, wintertime crappie fishing, not just on Oologah, which is what we're on today, can be really fun time. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, my favorite time of the year to fish is the wintertime. Everyone fishes in the spring. I have a lot less people out, and the fish school up. Springtime, it's really good, but a lot of times you'll have to fish a mile stretch of bank to catch what you're wanting to catch. In the wintertime and even the summertime, the crappie like to congregate and school up in really tight bunches. So when you learn to, we keep talking about this, when you learn to read your electronics and trust your electronics, you find that school of crappie, you don't have to move. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you'll be able to tell by the video, we have fished one brush pile this entire segment. And we probably have 25 keepers in the live box. We're getting ready to wrap it up for today, but I invite you to get your family and get out on the water, use your electronics, find the brush pile with crappie sitting on top of it, drop a couple jigs on top, and have a great time.
Well, whether it's a great crappie fishing trip or a wintertime goose hunt with friends, be sure and get outside and enjoy all the great outdoor opportunities our beautiful state has to offer. For all of us at your wildlife department, I'm Todd Craighead. We'll see you right back here next time on Outdoor Oklahoma.